The engines had been running for hours before sunrise, but nobody complained. In the darkness of northern France, the sound of American vehicles moving through narrow roads blended with the distant rumble of artillery. Headlights stayed covered. Voices stayed low. Men checked their weapons again and again. Maps were unfolded under weak flashlights. Watches were synchronized.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
Every soldier involved believed they were about to gain a precious advantage. Their commander had made a bold decision. He had moved before anyone else. The problem was that the enemy had moved faster. It was the early morning of December 19th, 1944. The place was the Ardennes region, a cold landscape of forests, hills, villages, and winding roads stretching across Belgium and Luxembourg. Just 3 days earlier, Germany had launched one of the most surprising offensives of the Second World War. The attack would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. Thousands of German troops and hundreds of tanks had smashed into American positions through heavy fog and snow. Entire sectors were thrown into confusion. Roads became clogged with retreating units, refugees, supply trucks, and reinforcements rushing toward the front. Among the American commanders responding to the crisis was Brigadier General Bruce C. Clarke. He was known as an aggressive officer who understood armored warfare. At a moment when many units were still trying to understand the scale of the German attack, Clarke was already thinking ahead. He knew that in a fast-moving battle, speed often mattered more than numbers. The side that reached critical roads, bridges, and crossroads first could shape everything that followed. As the cold morning slowly approached, Clarke and his staff studied reports coming from scattered reconnaissance teams. German armored spearheads were advancing westward. Their goal was ambitious. They hoped to break through Allied lines, cross the Meuse River, and create enough chaos to change the course of the war in the West. It was a desperate gamble by Adolf Hitler. But in those first days, it was creating real problems for the Allies. Clarke identified one location that stood out on every map spread across the tables. It was a small Belgian town called St. Vith. To someone looking at a map for the first time, St. Vith might appear ordinary. But military commanders saw something very different. Several important roads passed through the town. Whoever controlled those roads could move troops and supplies in multiple directions. In a battle where movement was everything, St. Vith was a prize. Clarke understood the danger immediately. If German forces captured and secured the area quickly, their offensive could gain momentum. If American troops could hold it, the entire German timetable could be disrupted. Every hour would matter. The American commander decided to act aggressively. Rather than wait for complete information, he pushed forces forward. Orders moved through headquarters. Tank units prepared to move. Infantry climbed aboard vehicles. Engineers gathered equipment. The goal was simple: reach critical positions before the Germans. For a brief moment, it seemed like the Americans had gained the initiative. Then, new reports began arriving. German armored columns were moving faster than expected. At first, the reports seemed isolated. A reconnaissance patrol spotted enemy vehicles farther west than anticipated. Another unit reported German tanks appearing near roads believed to be secure. A third report suggested enemy forces had already crossed areas that planners thought would remain uncontested for many more hours. The situation became uncomfortable. Clarke's staff checked the information repeatedly. Distances were measured. Maps were examined again. Yet the conclusion remained the same. The enemy was advancing at a speed that exceeded expectations. You can almost feel the tension inside the command posts during those hours. Every new message forced officers to adjust assumptions. Every estimate became outdated almost as soon as it was written. The battlefield was changing faster than the planners could track it. The German offensive benefited from several factors. Weather grounded much Allied air power. Fog covered roads and forests. Visibility remained poor. American commanders often received fragmented information. German armored formations, meanwhile, pushed relentlessly toward key objectives. Clarke realized something critical. This was no longer a race to gain an advantage. It was becoming a race to prevent disaster. As American units moved toward defensive positions, they encountered scenes of confusion. Roads were crowded. Some retreating soldiers carried stories of sudden attacks. Others described German tanks emerging from fog with little warning. Rumors spread quickly. Some were true, some were not. Distinguishing between them became difficult. Yet amid the confusion, one fact remained undeniable. German forces were pressing hard. Near St. Vith, American troops began organizing defensive positions. Infantry occupied villages. Tank destroyers prepared ambush sites. Artillery units selected firing positions. Engineers examined roads and bridges. Every available resource was used to slow the enemy. The weather added another layer of misery. Snow covered fields. Cold winds cut through uniforms. Vehicles struggled with icy roads. Men worked with frozen hands. Sleep became a luxury. Still, the defenses took shape. Then the first major clashes began. German armored units approached key routes leading toward St. Vith. American defenders opened fire. Artillery shells exploded among advancing formations. Tank destroyers engaged enemy vehicles from concealed positions. Infantry fought from buildings, forests, and roadside positions. The battle quickly became brutal. Unlike many dramatic portrayals of war, these engagements were often confusing. Visibility remained limited. Units became separated. Reports arrived late. Soldiers sometimes fought without knowing what was happening only a few hundred yards away. Yet the overall picture became increasingly clear. The Americans were buying time. And that time would prove incredibly valuable. Every delay imposed on German forces disrupted their schedule. Every destroyed vehicle created obstacles on crowded roads. Every defended crossroads forced the enemy to spend precious hours fighting instead of advancing. Clarke understood exactly what was happening. Although the Germans had moved faster initially, they were now being forced into costly battles. Their momentum was slowing. But the danger had not disappeared. German commanders continued applying pressure. Fresh attacks developed along multiple routes. Tanks and infantry pushed against American positions repeatedly. Some defensive lines bent. Others broke. New positions had to be organized constantly. The fighting around St. Vith became one of the most important actions during the opening phase of the Battle of the Bulge. American defenders often found themselves heavily outnumbered. Yet they continued resisting. Their efforts prevented the Germans from using the road network as efficiently as planned. For Clarke, every hour gained represented an achievement. Still, the situation remained fragile. By December 20 and 21, pressure increased further. German units launched coordinated attacks designed to overwhelm defenders. Artillery barrages struck positions throughout the area. Communications became more difficult. Ammunition consumption increased, casualties mounted. The strain on commanders grew intense. Imagine trying to make decisions while receiving incomplete reports from dozens of locations simultaneously. One unit requests reinforcements. Another reports enemy armor. A third loses radio contact. Weather limits visibility. Roads remain crowded. Every decision carries consequences. This was the reality facing American leaders during those days. Clarke continued adapting. Positions were adjusted, reserves were committed carefully, defensive lines were reorganized whenever necessary. Rather than focusing on holding every inch of ground, commanders concentrated on preserving combat effectiveness while delaying the enemy as much as possible. It was a practical approach born from experience. Meanwhile, German commanders faced problems of their own. Although their offensive had achieved surprise, maintaining momentum proved difficult. Roads became congested. Fuel consumption increased. American resistance created delays. The deeper German forces advanced, the more complicated their logistical situation became. What initially appeared to be rapid success began encountering friction. This is one of the most fascinating realities of warfare. A plan can look perfect on a map. Timetables can appear reasonable. Objectives can seem achievable. Yet once thousands of men and vehicles begin moving through real terrain under combat conditions, problems emerge everywhere. The Battle of the Bulge demonstrated this repeatedly. At St. Vith, American resistance forced German commanders to devote time and resources toward reducing a stubborn obstacle. Those delays multiplied across the broader offensive. The race continued. Clarke and his soldiers understood they could not hold indefinitely. The enemy possessed significant strength. Eventually, positions might need to be abandoned. But delaying actions can be strategically valuable even when territory is lost. This concept became increasingly important. By late December, Allied reinforcements were arriving in greater numbers. Defensive lines elsewhere were stabilizing. The initial shock of the German offensive was fading. Command structures regained clarity. Coordination improved. The time purchased around St. Vith contributed directly to that process. The fighting remained intense. Artillery thundered across snowy landscapes. Tanks maneuvered through villages and forests. Infantry endured exhausting conditions. Yet the broader situation was gradually shifting. The Germans had moved faster at the beginning. Now they were losing speed. That difference would matter enormously. One reason the Battle of the Bulge remains so compelling is that it highlights how quickly fortunes can change during military operations. Early success does not guarantee final victory. Initial setbacks do not guarantee defeat. Clarke's decision to move early reflected an understanding of this reality. He recognized that waiting could be fatal. Action created opportunities. Even when the enemy gained ground faster than expected, immediate action helped create resistance before the situation became irreversible. Many historians later examined the defense of St. Vith as an example of effective operational leadership under pressure. The defenders faced difficult circumstances. Information remained incomplete. Enemy strength was significant. Yet commanders continued adapting. Flexibility became essential. Throughout military history, some leaders become trapped by their original plans. When circumstances change, they continue pursuing outdated objectives. Clarke avoided that mistake. He adjusted continuously based on evolving conditions. That adaptability helped transform a dangerous situation into a meaningful defensive success. As December progressed, weather conditions slowly improved. Allied aircraft returned to the skies more frequently. German supply problems worsened. Fuel shortages became increasingly severe. Reinforcements strengthened Allied positions. The balance shifted further. German hopes of achieving a decisive breakthrough diminished with each passing day. For soldiers on the ground, however, these larger trends were not always obvious. They focused on immediate survival, holding positions, supporting comrades, completing missions, enduring cold, fatigue, and danger. War often looks different depending on perspective. A general sees maps, movements, and objectives. A soldier sees the next field, the next road, the next hour. Both perspectives mattered during the Battle of the Bulge. The American defenders around St. Vith continued demonstrating remarkable determination. Their efforts contributed to slowing one of Germany's last major offensives in the West. Eventually, the German attack lost momentum entirely. Allied forces counterattacked. Lost ground was gradually recovered. The bulge in the front line that gave the battle its name began shrinking. German units retreated. The offensive failed to achieve its strategic goals. Looking back, it is tempting to view the outcome as inevitable. It was not. During those cold days in December 1944, uncertainty dominated everything. Nobody knew exactly how events would unfold. Commanders made decisions with limited information. Soldiers faced dangers without knowing the final outcome. That uncertainty is what makes the story so powerful. When Brigadier General Bruce Clarke moved his forces before anyone else, he was trying to stay ahead of the crisis. For a brief period, it appeared he might succeed completely. Then reality intervened. The enemy moved faster. Many commanders might have panicked. Others might have frozen while waiting for better information. Clarke did neither. Instead, he adapted. He recognized that the race had changed. Winning no longer meant arriving first. Winning meant preventing the enemy from exploiting its early advantage. That distinction shaped everything that followed. The defense around St. Vith became more than a local action. It became part of a larger effort to absorb, slow, and ultimately defeat Germany's final major gamble in Western Europe. The men involved could not know all of that at the time. They simply did their jobs under extremely difficult conditions. Yet their actions carried consequences far beyond the roads and villages where they fought. As snow covered the Ardennes and artillery echoed across frozen valleys, a crucial lesson emerged from the chaos. Speed matters in war. Initiative matters in war. But adaptability may matter most of all. The American commander moved before anyone else. The enemy moved faster. For a moment, that seemed like the beginning of defeat. Instead, it became the beginning of resistance. And that resistance helped change the course of one of the most dramatic battles of the Second World War. Long after the guns fell silent, the story remained a reminder that victory is not always decided by who starts first. Sometimes, it is decided by who responds best when the unexpected happens. In the frozen forests around St. Vith during December 1944, that truth revealed itself hour by hour, mile by mile, and sacrifice by sacrifice. The Germans won the opening race. The Americans won the larger contest. And at the center of that story stood a commander who refused to stop moving, even after discovering that the enemy had moved faster.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.